I suppose with the book, like what was your reasoning behind it? And then you might tell us what you're covering in it.
Yeah, so when I was a prosecutor, especially being a money laundering, have you ever served on a jury? I don't know if Poland or Ireland
I've
has
had a criminal
juries.
case against me. I've had over 100 court cases, so I know what it's like to be in court. And I've had prosecutors fall asleep across me, and I just wanted to get up and punch them. So I know what it's like, and I was cleared because obviously they were coming after me to take my money. But I'm familiar with the judicial system.
Okay, well, so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it, you know, too often in court things are too complicated, right? And in the United States justice system, if you're taking away somebody's liberty and you have to convince 12 people to find somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, which is our high burden, you really almost effectively have to convince them beyond all doubt. Because, like, if you're a human and you feel any doubt that somebody's guilty, you don't want to send them possibly to prison, right? So, like, you want to be sure this person did it, right? And the best way to do that is to explain things very simply, very straightforwardly, and as easily and as non-complex as possible. So we always used to joke that the best skill that a prosecutor could have is being able to take very complex topics and explain them in a very simple, relatable way. Like we have an expression, I don't know if you have it, KISS, keep it simple, stupid,
Yeah.
right? It's like a policy to live by. And I noticed when I went from the government to Chainalysis, the blockchain analytics company you mentioned, we did a lot of training for law enforcement around the world, banks around the world, regulators around the world. And the simpler that we could make the explanation and the more relatable that we could make it, the more people felt empowered because then they actually understood it. And they didn't need to understand the technical difficulty or, the intricacies of like how to hash transact. They just needed to understand the concepts to be able to kind of have enough of a view to say, I understand this enough to make life choices, right? And so when I wrote the book, I had spent nearly a decade in the government. I had worked in a blockchain analytics company. I had spent a year investigating the disease that is eating America alive that led to the attack on January 6th. I had just watched so much misinformation and disinformation and political brokenness. And when I formed the association, I was traveling around the world attending events, and I got to speak to all these regulators and policymakers and business people from around the world. And, it's a small number of Americans who get the privilege of traveling outside of the country. Tons of Americans don't even have a passport, and it's cost prohibitive. So I got this incredible opportunity to visit tons of countries and speak to tons of people. And there was this thing that I was seeing that was basically like something was happening in the world that we weren't talking about. Like what was happening in America was much worse than anyone was talking about. And what was happening outside of America was actually pretty great and nobody was talking about it objectively. And so I decided to write this book about, hey, if you want to know what's happening in the world in a very straightforward, easy to understand way, there's a lot of things that you should be aware of because some books will focus on one thing, American political and economic dysfunction, or another book will focus on like the rise of nationalism or, the social engineering and social manipulation. And my thing is nobody has time to read all of those books, right? But maybe if you had one book that talked about all of them and explained how all of them interact, and it was a breadth book and not necessarily a go into depth on each and every topic book, if you had a 360 view of what was happening in the world, maybe a lot of us would feel less afraid if we felt like we better understood what was going on. And maybe we could solve more problems if all of us understood all the different factors that were going into it. And the book talks about politics, but it's really not meant to be political. I criticize parties on both sides. I criticize companies. I talk about the facts of what basically the planet is doing and where we're at. And if you're a human that kind of wants to know, or a citizen of the world or a citizen of some country, I'd like to think that it explains what's happening, especially in terms of the financial world order, in a way that empowers people to make better life choices, especially regulators and policymakers who I feel like sometimes sit in their little silo and don't look outside and don't think about all the things that might be impacting their jobs that they just don't get a chance to see.